Hey guys, tonight we're doing something especially cosy, or at least it pretends to be. We're slipping under the threadbare blankets of the Middle Ages to explore how people actually tried to sleep. No blackout curtains, no melatonin, no concept of sleep hygiene, unless that means sharing a bed with your cousins, fleas, and a sense of existential dread. Before you drift off into this medieval fever dream, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy falling asleep to the sound of history slowly disappointing you. And let me know in the comments, what time is it where you are? And are you already regretting staying up this late? Always curious who else is wandering the internet when they should be unconscious. So dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, or pretend it's the soft roar of a medieval wolf howling in the distance. And let's tuck into tonight's grim little lullaby. Congratulations, you've just been teleported into the past. It's the 14th century. There's no phone, no alarm clock, no idea what time it is. But you're awake, and that's already suspicious. You open your eyes to darkness, not modern cozy darkness, but full spectrum medieval void. A blackness so complete it feels like the air itself has texture. The kind of darkness that makes you wonder if your eyeballs are still attached. There's no ceiling light, no bedside lamp, no glowing phone screen to fry your circadian rhythm. Just cold. And maybe the sound of something alive skittering nearby. You don't know what it is. You don't ask. You just hope it isn't hungry. You're lying on a bed. And by bed, we mean a compressed haystack, wrapped in burlap, flattened by generations of regret. There's a blanket on top of you. Or technically, above you. Calling it a blanket is generous. It's a rectangle of damp wool that smells like it once belonged to a very nervous sheep. You're not even sure if it's warmer under it or beside it. All you know is that you're itchy. In places you didn't know could itch. You try to move. Bad idea. Your back cracks like a haunted staircase. Your knees creak like they've got hinges. You're probably 20 years old, which in medieval terms means you've got about 15 good teeth and 5 good years left. There's a dull ache in your shoulder. Is it from yesterday's labour? From sleeping on a stick? Or is it just medieval air, which causes pain on contact? Hard to say. You listen. The room is not silent. It's never silent. You hear a goat snoring softly in the corner. Someone, probably your brother, or your uncle, or a person whose name you've never learned but has lived here for 5 years, is muttering in their sleep. Someone else just let out a breath that sounds suspiciously like a death rattle. You try not to take it personally. Time doesn't exist here. Not the way you know it. No numbers glowing red on a digital clock. No smart watch buzzing your wrist. You wake when the world tells you to. Sometimes that's the sun. Sometimes it's a rooster. Sometimes it's your bladder. And sometimes it's just a strange, existential dread that climbs into your chest and says, "Hey, it's 3 a.m. Time to relive all your failures." You don't know what hour it is. It might be midnight. It might be morning. There's no way to tell. Outside, it's still pitch black. The fire in the hearth is just a smear of ash now. Your only time-keeping method is the church bell. And even that depends on whether the bell ringer remembered to wake up. Spoiler, he didn't. You lie there, unsure if you should sleep or get up. But sleep doesn't come easy. Not here. Not in this century. Not with fleas nesting in your eyebrows and someone's feet in your ribcage. You're trying to drift off, but the mattress pokes you in new and exciting places every time you shift. You miss memory foam. You don't know what memory foam is, but your body does. It weeps for it. There's no pillow, just a sack stuffed with straw and disappointment. You've tried to fluff it before. It fought back. You lost. You glance toward the doorway. There is no door, just a piece of cloth hanging limply, letting in every draught, every noise, and possibly every demon. The wind slips through the cracks in the walls and taps your skin with icy fingers. You curl tighter under the blanket. Now you're slightly warmer, and also unable to breathe. Perfect balance. Your eyes begin to close. You almost drift off. Then someone coughs. Not a polite modern cough, but a deep, wet, medieval cough. The kind that feels like it could summon a ghost. Maybe it's your father. Maybe it's the local carpenter who sleeps in your corner now. Doesn't matter. You're awake again. And now you're wondering, was that just a cough? Or the start of something plague adjacent? You turn over, hoping sleep will come anyway. It doesn't. You lie there in the half dark. Body stiff. Mind racing. Nostrils full of goat. Time becomes meaningless. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel like centuries. Ironically, you're already there. You shift again. Bad idea. Your back makes a noise like someone snapping celery underwater. Now you're facing the other side of the room, which is somehow worse. That side has the chicken. Yes, the chicken sleeps inside. Why? Because it's winter. And chickens freeze too. So there it is, roosting on a beam near the ceiling, one eye open like it knows something you don't. You make brief eye contact. It blinks. You blink. The moment stretches into a shared nightmare, and then it clucks. You hate that chicken. You're still not asleep. The straw under you has formed strategic spikes that poke into your lower spine with surgical precision. You try to shift your weight. You succeed only in waking the family dog, who growls softly and stretches his legs across your shins. He smells like he's been rolling in old stew, which is possible because he has. That's not a metaphor. He rolled in stew. You watched it happen yesterday and did nothing to stop it. And now you're paying the price. Someone lets out a groan across the room. It's unclear if it's from a dream or reality. Either way, it reverberates off the wooden beams and through your soul. You shut your eyes tighter and pretend you didn't hear it. Now your foot is cold. Not like chilly, but cold. You reach down. The blanket has betrayed you, ridden up during the night, leaving a sliver of skin exposed to medieval air. Medieval air, by the way, is different. It's wetter, angrier. It holds grudges. You try to tug the blanket down. It doesn't move. It's heavy with last year's grime and something sticky you've decided not to question. You briefly consider standing up, maybe pacing around to tire yourself out. Then you remember, the floor is made of packed earth and it's wet. Why is it wet? No one knows. No one ever knows. It might be rain, or spilled ale, or just time. Time does things to dirt in this century. You lie back down, or rather you stay horizontal and wonder if this counts as lying down if your soul is upright and screaming. There is a faint sound outside, a distant howl. Probably a wolf, or a very hungry pilgrim. In either case, you hope they're not coming here because this hut is full. Of people, of lice, of secrets. No room for outsiders. You try again to sleep. This time you count your blessings. Literally. You count things. 1 roof, leaky. 2 parents, snoring. 3 goats, too close. 4 siblings, fighting in their sleep. 5 lice bites, new. 6 cracked toes, don't ask. 7 reasons to cry. 8 hours till the sun. You never make it to 9. Because someone farts, loudly, violently. It cuts through the darkness like a trumpet from hell. You stifle a laugh. You can't help it. The fart echoes. It echoes. How is that possible? The hut is 6 feet wide, but somehow, acoustically, it becomes a cathedral for flatulence. No one says anything. That's the rule. You pretend it didn't happen. You all live in a shared silence. A truce built on shame and survival. Eventually, after what feels like a fortnight and one minor existential crisis, your body begins to shut down. Your eyes grow heavy. Your mind drifts. Sleep, glorious sleep, starts to creep in. And then the bell. The church bell rings in the distance. Not melodically, not gently, but like someone's banging metal against metal in a rage, which they are. It's the bell ringer's job, and he hates it. You jolt awake again and wonder, is this morning? Is this midnight prayer? Is this a test? You don't know. You never know. There are no numbers here, just noise and questions. You lay still, very still, hoping maybe, if you stay perfectly motionless, your body will fall asleep while your brain waits. This is the closest thing medieval people have to sleep hygiene. Giving up. You try not to cry. Not because it's shameful, but because your tears would freeze halfway down your cheeks. And anyway, showing weakness might wake the rooster. And if the rooster wakes up early, so does everyone else, including you. And then sleep isn't just lost, it's cancelled until further notice. You wrap your arms around yourself, pretending it helps. It doesn't. Your breath fogs up in front of your face, proof that your lungs are still bravely participating in this charade called rest. You whisper a quick prayer to no one in particular, not for peace, not for warmth, just for unconsciousness, that sweet medieval luxury. Then something touches your leg. You freeze. Don't scream. Screaming is frowned upon, especially at night. You slowly move your foot. The thing moves with it. Is it a rat? A sibling's foot? Your own foot? And the darkness is so complete, it could be your soul trying to escape. And you shift slightly, hoping it was a dream or a trick of the straw. But no, the feeling is still there. Cold. Damp. Alive. You've just discovered a new bedmate. Probably a mouse. Possibly a devil. Welcome to the open door policy of medieval bedding. You toss a corner of the blanket over it and pretend that solves the problem. That's how most things are handled here anyway. If you can't see it, it doesn't exist. Same goes for illness, sin, and the priest's drinking problem. As you lie there, twitching, scratching, freezing, you start to realise something horrible. This isn't an accident. This isn't just a bad night. This is normal. This is every night. People don't sleep through the night in this time period. That's not a failure. That's the design. There's no concept of 8 uninterrupted hours. No deep REM cycle. No lavender-scented memory foam mattress whispering encouragement. There's just first sleep and second sleep. You don't know this consciously, of course, but your body is aware. It's built into your biology. You sleep for a few hours after sundown. Wake up around midnight for no reason. Sit there staring into the void or whispering with your spouse or praying. No one dies tonight, then sleep again until dawn. That middle of the night limbo isn't insomnia. It's just medieval intermission. You lie awake for an hour, maybe 2. No one tracks it. Time is a fog. The only clocks that exist are church bells and your neighbour's sleep moans. Eventually, your body gives in again. Not because you're comfortable. You're not. But because it just can't fight anymore. Sleep creeps back in like a stray cat, unwanted but familiar. You drift off. And you dream. Or, more accurately, you hallucinate. Because dreams in the Middle Ages aren't soft or symbolic. They're raw, weird, visceral. No one told your brain how to filter content. You dream of dogs with human faces, of fire raining from the sky, of your neighbour turning into a turnip. Normal stuff. Dream interpretation is a whole thing. If you tell someone about that dream, you'll either be blessed, exercised, or avoided at the market. Maybe all 3, but none of that matters now. Because you're finally unconscious. For a little while. You're dreaming you're flying. Or maybe drowning. It's hard to tell in medieval dreams. Water and air both feel like metaphors and diseases. Then something jabs your side, and just like that, you're awake again. Why? Because someone had to pee. You hear the shuffling, the whispered curses, the slosh of a chamber pot being dragged across the room like a cursed relic. The medieval midnight bathroom run, not a solo mission, but a full community experience. You lie perfectly still, eyes wide, pretending to be asleep so you're not asked to help. Not that there's much to help with. There's no toilet, no privacy. Just someone balancing on one foot in the dark, trying not to knock over the sleeping goat while relieving themselves into a bucket that's seen too much. Then comes the worst part, the toss. Yes, the contents are going outside. Through the door? No, through the window. Also no, just outside, somewhere, with hope, luck, and gravity. You pray the wind isn't blowing in. It usually is. The deed is done. The pot sloshes its way back. The sleeper settles down. And the night resumes, but not quietly. Because now it's cold. Colder than before. The fire's completely out. The coals are dead. The frost creeps in like an unwelcome thought. The air has bite. Not metaphorical bite. Actual bite. Your nose is numb. Your toes are somewhere between tingly and dead. You curl into yourself like a dying spider. It helps, but only slightly. The blanket is moist again. How is it always moist? You consider whispering to someone just to pass the time. But you remember the last time someone whispered at night. They got accused of being a witch, for summoning strange voices. You don't need that kind of drama before sunrise, so you lie in silence, or try to, because someone else starts whispering prayers. Quiet, rhythmic, Latin you don't understand. Probably your grandmother. Or a ghost. Again, hard to tell. She does this every night. Maybe it helps her sleep. Maybe it keeps demons away. Maybe it's just her way of filling the dark so it doesn't fill her. You listen, eyes open, waiting for the second sleep to come. Eventually it does. Not like a gentle wave, more like falling into a shallow hole. And this time, it's deep. Not restful. Not peaceful. Just deeper than consciousness. You don't dream. You don't move. You just exist, barely. And when the rooster crows, horribly, proudly, right into your soul, You jolt upright, unsure whether you slept at all or just briefly died. Your neck hurts. Your jaw aches. Your brain is fog. But the sun is peeking through the cracks in the wall. And that means one thing. It's morning. Which means sleep is officially over. No matter how unfinished it feels. You survived the night. Technically. And that's as good as it gets. Let's talk about your bedroom, or rather, your designated area of horizontal suffering. In the 14th century, bedroom is a generous term. You don't have a bedroom, no one does, you have a room. Singular. It's not open concept. It's open everything. The kitchen is the bedroom. The stable is the hallway. The closet is the ceiling, where things hang until they fall. And your floor plan is just dirt, real dirt, with worms, and sometimes soup. You sleep in the same place you eat, work, cough, argue, pray, and occasionally give birth. There is no privacy, not now, not ever. You're one of 8 or 10 or 12 people in a single room wooden hut, and the walls are so thin you can hear your neighbour's tooth rot in real time. The smell hits you first, not like a punch, more like a warm, damp slap. It's everywhere. The musk of old straw, spilled beer, spoiled milk, sweat, unwashed wool, and the kind of fungal presence that only grows where light is forbidden and feet are encouraged. Let's break it down. The mattress. It's not. It's a sack of hay, but not fresh hay. Fresh hay is for animals you like. This is reused hay, second hand, possibly third. It smells like the underside of a barn and feels like you're lying on a pile of angry sticks. It doesn't cushion, it attacks. The blanket, it's made of wool, thick, scratchy, and heavy. Not in a comforting way, but in a this has absorbed a winter's worth of body moisture, an emotional trauma kind of way. It's not washed regularly. It's not washed ever. It's simply passed down, generation to generation, like trauma in textile form. The pillow, optional. By optional, we mean non-existent unless you're royalty. Most people just use a folded tunic. If you're lucky, that tunic is your own. If not, you share it with the person whose name you still don't know, and who might be your cousin, neighbour, or surprise uncle. You might be wondering, what about beds, as in wooden frames? 4 legs? Something that elevates you above the filth? Those are for the wealthy, nobles, merchants, maybe the village priest. You don't have a bed, you have a designated corner. If you're lucky. Most nights you sleep wherever there's room. That might mean next to the fire pit, or against the wall, or in the warm groove left by someone who already got up. And let's be clear, you are not sleeping alone. That idea? Foreign, laughable, modern. You sleep in groups. Entire families curled up like spoons in a dirty drawer. Parents, children, grandparents, visiting cousins, seasonal tradesmen, and any random livestock deemed too valuable to freeze outside. It's not cute. It's not cosy. It's human Tetris. And you're the L-shaped piece that never fits right. There is no such thing as personal space. There is only shared misery. Let's talk about livestock. Yes, they're inside, chickens, goats, maybe a pig. They wander in and out freely, as confused by the arrangement as you are. They make noise. They relieve themselves. They occasionally sleep on you, but they're warm, and that's enough to justify it. The goat that pooped next to your face last night might be the only reason you didn't freeze to death. Congratulations. You have a survival goat. Lighting. There is none. You have firelight if you can afford fuel. A sputtering candle if you're rich. A rushlight maybe. That's a stick dipped in animal fat. It burns with all the grace of a regret. Otherwise it's darkness, full and aggressive. When the sun goes down, so does your visibility. Forever. Good luck finding your shoes in the morning. Or your dignity. You might think, well, at least the roof keeps the rain out. Oh, sweet summer child, the roof is thatched. A charming euphemism for pile of sticks and straw precariously lashed together by hope and string. It leaks. Always. Rain gets in. Cold gets in. Sometimes rats get in, and they don't leave. They just relocate from roof to floor, voyeur your face. In summer, the thatch traps heat like a medieval sauna. You lie in your sweat, trying to breathe without inhaling someone else's. In winter, the gaps between the beams become miniature wind tunnels. You can hear the cold howling through them like it's trying to claim rent. And walls? Not much better. They're wood or wattle and daub. That's twigs smeared with mud. Yes, mud. And you thought drywall was a scam. The walls don't insulate, they echo. Every cough, snore, argument, or deeply personal dream is shared with the entire household. And if your neighbour is loud, and he always is, his dreams become your dreams. You wake up not just tired, but overstimulated. Not because anything happened, but because everything happened, all around you, all at once, in one tiny wooden box, masquerading as a home. And through it all, you tell yourself, tonight will be better. Tonight I'll sleep. You won't, but it's nice to pretend. It's morning now. But inside your home, that doesn't mean light. The sun has risen, technically, but it's struggling to make its way through the smoke-stained air and the slit of a doorway covered by a curtain that once aspired to be a shirt. The room remains dim, gloomy, like the inside of a mouth. Shadows stretch across every surface, crawling up the walls made from mud-packed twigs and wishful thinking. One wrong bump and the entire place could collapse, burying you in a perfectly mediocre grave just 2 feet from your soup pot. You sit up, if there's space. There usually isn't. There's a knee near your face, an elbow in your ribs, and someone's breath fogging up the side of your neck. You shift slowly, surgically, like a snake trying to shed its skin without waking the entire swamp. The air inside is complex. Warm, sour, thick. It smells like bodies. Living bodies, dying bodies. Sweaty, sick, gassy bodies, all breathing and stewing in the same square footage. There's an undercurrent of mildew, a layer of goat, and a fine mist of whatever fermented in that corner last week. You could bottle it and sell it as Eau de 14th century. Only no one would buy it, not even ironically. You find your footing and try to stand, but your legs argue. They were asleep before you were. The floor beneath you is cold and vaguely moist. It's unclear whether the moisture is from rain, spilled ale, or just the natural dampness that happens when humans sleep stacked like firewood. You don't ask. You don't want to ask. There's no furniture. There's just the hearth in the middle, the fire pit, where everything happens. It's where food is made, if there is food, where light is born, if you have fuel, and where ashes collect like snowdrifts of failure. If it's warm, you huddle near it. If it's out, you huddle anyway and pretend. Around the edges of the room, bundles of clothing hang from wooden pegs. not to dry, just to hang. No one has enough clothes for drying to be a process. Most people own one outfit, two if they're lucky, or recently robbed someone smaller than them. The tunics are stiff with grease and dirt, the colours long faded into a uniform shade of used to be beige. The ceiling is low. If you're tall, you hunch. If you're short, you hunch out of habit. Smoke gathers above your head, hovering in a permanent cloud like an accusatory spirit. The lack of a proper chimney means most of the smoke goes nowhere. It just sits there, aging you from the inside out. Your lungs have the texture of peat. A chicken flutters past your ankle. You didn't see it arrive. You never do. They have full access to the household. They roam freely, unbothered by the social expectations that bind everyone else. You're not in charge. The chickens are. Beside the hearth, someone's boiling water in a blackened pot. The water isn't clean, but boiling makes it survivable. Most of the time. You don't drink it because it's good. You drink it because you like breathing. And because beer isn't ready yet. The walls creak with every step. You can hear your sister waking up, the crack of her spine echoing like a tree falling in slow motion. Somewhere in the background, a child whines. Not yours. No one's sure whose. He lives here now. That's enough. You glance toward the door again. That ragged curtain flapping in the wind. It leads to everything. And to nothing. You're trapped inside, not by locks, but by life. Outside is mud, work, hunger. Inside is warmth, noise, and the kind of intimacy that makes you question your commitment to humanity. A neighbour calls out from their own hut, just 2 feet away. Their voice pierces the wall like it isn't there, because it barely is. They want to borrow something. A tool, a spoon, a scrap of cloth. You don't have it. You never do. But you say yes, because it's easier than saying no. Because no one owns anything alone in a house like this. There's no door to slam, no room to storm off into. If you argue, you do it 3 feet from your bed and 2 inches from your uncle. Every conversation is public. Every secret is loud. The walls are thin. The privacy is thinner. You're not sure when you last had a moment alone. Not emotionally, physically. There's always someone within breathing distance. Family, neighbours, strangers. You sleep next to them. You eat beside them. You cry into the same fire. You are never, ever alone. And this is just life. You lean back against the wall, if only to feel something solid. The wall disagrees. It gives a little, the way old things do when they're tired of pretending to be useful. A puff of cold air leaks through a crack just wide enough for regret to squeeze in. The cold is inside now. It's in your fingers, in your ears, in the weird space between your ribs and your shirt, where heat goes to die. There's no insulation. The concept doesn't exist. Heat, when it appears, escapes immediately. You don't blame it. You would too. Outside, the wind howls. Not gently. This isn't a Disney storm. It screams against the structure like it knows it can win. Every gust rattles the frame of the hut. Every shudder of the wood sounds like a whispered warning. You've stopped hoping the roof holds. Now you just hope it falls slowly. The window, if you can call it that, is a small opening covered with oiled cloth. It doesn't open. It doesn't close. It just exists to remind you what cold looks like. Sometimes rain seeps in through the edges. You've placed a bowl beneath it. The bowl is full. The ground beneath your feet is mud in winter and dust in summer. Right now it's mud, but with a mysterious crunchy top layer. You try not to think about that. It's better not to know. The ceiling creaks above you. Something's moving up there. Probably a rat, possibly a cat. Definitely not your problem. Until it falls. Which happens sometimes. Things fall from the ceiling. Creatures, objects, entire sections. It's accepted. Like taxes. Or death. In the corner, someone coughs again. Not the polite kind of cough. Not the, excuse me, I swallowed wrong kind. The kind that sounds like it has a backstory. Deep, wet, lingering. The kind of cough that medieval Europe sends as a warning shot. No one says anything. No one offers help. What would you offer? A warm thought? A prayer? Half a turnip? The cough continues, then fades. You exhale. Across the room the goat sneezes. The fire crackles. Barely. The wood is damp, but it's all you had. It spits and hisses, releasing more smoke than heat. Your eyes water. Your throat scratches. It smells like scorched mould and failure. But the little warmth it gives is enough to keep your hands from going fully blue, so you accept the trade. You reach toward the fire, holding your palms over the heat. You can't feel your fingers until they're too close. Then you pull back, shaking the pain out. It's a ritual. Warmth, then regret. Then again. Around you people begin to rise. No one says good morning. There is no good. There is only morning. They step carefully, dodging limbs and livestock, making their way toward the hearth like moths to a dying ember. The baby is still crying. Of course. Babies cry. Constantly. They're cold, they're hungry. They're alive and aware of it. That's enough to warrant tears. Someone rocks the child without rhythm, muttering under their breath. A lullaby? A prayer? A threat? Hard to tell. You look up again. The thatched roof is dripping. Not water, just moisture. Condensation maybe. Or breath. Or time. It slides down the walls in little rivulets, tracing muddy paths to the daub and into your bedding. You move your sleeping space over by a few inches. It doesn't help. The new spot is worse. Above you, someone's hung herbs. They say it keeps out evil. Or illness. Or mice. It doesn't. But it smells vaguely like something other than goat, so it stays. Sprigs of dried sage and something pretending to be lavender. They rustle when the wind hits, as if they're laughing. You lie back down, briefly. The hay pokes through the sack, like it has a personal grudge. It's damp. Again. Or still. At this point, you're unsure if it ever dries. It's always slightly moist, like bread left in a cave. You curl into yourself, drawing your knees up, wrapping the wool blanket tighter. Not for warmth, but for containment. It doesn't help. Nothing does. And yet, you survive the morning. It's still early, but time has lost all meaning inside this hut, where the light barely changes and the air tastes like other people. Everyone is moving now, slowly like thawing corpses. Your family rises not out of eagerness, but necessity. Staying horizontal any longer just means absorbing more of the floor. Someone is brushing dust off their tunic, which is ironic, since the dust is part of it now. It's been stitched into the fabric by years of smoke, sweat, and time. Laundry isn't a routine, it's a crisis. You don't clean clothes, you wait for them to stop smelling worse, and then declare victory. A neighbour's voice cuts through the wall. Again, loud, cheerful, which is frankly offensive. He's already outside, stomping through the mud in clogs that were clearly designed by someone with a grudge against human feet. He's calling for help with something. A stuck cart? A dead goat? A moral dilemma? You don't answer. If you make eye contact, you're involved. Someone else is feeding the fire now, or trying to. They add damp twigs, which hiss and spit, creating more smoke than flame. It fills the room with a scent of failure and pine. The children cough. The dog sneezes. The chicken doesn't move. She's learned that effort is pointless. You glance again at the ceiling. The beams look warped. Damp, swollen, sagging under the weight of last season's regret. You try not to imagine the roof collapsing in the night. It's not paranoia. It happens. Sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly. Either way, you won't be warned. The floor remains untrustworthy. There's a soft spot near the hearth that started to sink. Someone says it's because of the rain. Someone else says it's because of curses. Either way, you've stopped stepping there. You pretend it's a decorative feature, a medieval sunken living room, the kind that eats your foot if you're not careful. The rest of the room is no better. The far wall sags inward slightly, warped by years of moisture and size. The windows don't close. The wind doesn't ask permission. You find yourself constantly rearranging yourself and your belongings, not to improve comfort, but to minimize new forms of discomfort. Everything is about managing discomfort. That's your entire architectural philosophy now. You don't fix anything. You reposition. You don't upgrade. You endure. A clump of straw falls from the ceiling. No one looks up. You all saw it. You all agreed silently not to acknowledge it. To speak of it is to invite more. Your body aches. Not from one specific thing. From all things. The floor. The bedding. The cold. The weight of wool. The weight of time. You're 20, but your spine has the personality of someone who's seen kingdoms fall. And still, people around you smile. Briefly. Softly. They joke about the fire. About the goat. About the way the wind sounds like the priest when he's had too much communion wine. Humour here isn't optional, it's structural. If you stop laughing, the house might actually collapse from the sheer gravity of your shared existence. Someone opens the curtain that serves as a door. Light spills in. Not warmth, just light. Cold, grey, indifferent light that illuminates all the splinters and sagging beams you'd rather not think about. But it's also morning. Officially. Which means your sleeping hours are over, regardless of how unfinished they felt. You won't rest again until nightfall, and even then, rest is a generous term. You step outside. Mud clings to your feet. The wind punches your face. A neighbour nods. A chicken poops next to you. It's all very routine, and yet, as miserable as it is, there's a rhythm to it. A grim choreography of survival. You don't sleep well. You don't live comfortably. But you keep going. Because this, the cold, the creaking, the crowding, the chronic sleep deprivation, this is home. You've been awake for 7 minutes, and already you want to lie back down and disintegrate. But that's not allowed. In medieval life, fatigue isn't a valid excuse. It's just the default setting. There's no word for burnout. That would imply you were ever lit. The day starts before the sun has properly figured out what it's doing. A dim smear of grey filters through the oiled rag that serves as your window, and that counts as morning. There is no snooze button, no alarm clock, just livestock noises, clanging pans, and a shrill reminder from your mother that bread doesn't bake itself and goats don't milk each other. You sit up. Your joints click like a poorly made marionette. Your knees wobble. Your eyes are still halfway closed, crusted with medieval air, a mixture of soot, sleep, and stale cabbage. But you're upright, which is the only qualification required to be considered ready. There's no such thing as easing into the day, no warm shower, no slow brewed coffee. You splash cold water on your face, not because it wakes you up, but because someone poured it into your bowl last night and it's still there. It's gritty. Something moves in it. You accept this and continue. Your first task isn't noble or poetic. It's sweeping. With a broom made of twigs tied together like a cursed whisk, you push mud, straw, and fragments of life from one end of the room to the other. The goal is not cleanliness, it's containment. You don't clean the floor. You herd the dirt into corners, behind barrels, under goats. Everyone else is moving too. Children are poking at the fire, adults are poking at children, and someone, always someone, is already talking about work. The word breakfast floats through the room, but it's a vague promise. Something that might happen, but only after you've already earned it. The fatigue is bone deep. Not from one night of bad sleep, but from every night. From years of sleeping in the same position on the same straw pile, breathing in the same mould spores, twitching at the same rat sounds. You're never rested, just slightly less tired than you will be tonight. You stumble outside. The cold air slaps your face. The sun, if it's visible, isn't warm. It just hangs there, mocking you. The yard is mud. Thick, sticky, foot-hungry mud that grabs your ankles and whispers, "Why even try? You try anyway." Because there's work to do. There's always work to do. You grab a bucket. It's heavier than you remember. Probably because it's full of regret. Or water. Hard to say. You head for the well. Or the river. Or wherever your designated misery source happens to be. You walk slowly, knees bending wrong, spine curving like a sad question mark. You've barely begun, and already your arms ache. Once you have the water, it's time to cook. Which sounds comforting, until you remember what cooking means. There is no stove, no oven, just a fire, a pot, and whatever ingredients didn't rot in the night. You scrape together barley, some onion skin, a turnip that looks judgmental, and half a leek is not a meal, it's a suggestion. While the pot bubbles, slowly, grudgingly, you mend clothing, or grind grain, or scrape animal hides. You do something, anything, because the second you stop moving, someone accuses you of laziness. And laziness in this world is a sin just slightly less offensive than theft and slightly more offensive than heresy. The fatigue builds. It doesn't rise, it seeps. Like smoke through the thatch, it's in your bones, your blood, your thoughts. You don't yawn. You sigh, long, slow exhales that sound like you're trying to deflate your soul. And still the day hasn't truly begun, because soon you'll be in the fields, or carrying bundles of firewood half your body weight, or thatching a neighbour's roof because their brother helped your cousin birth a goat last spring, and now you're eternally in their debt. You labour because you must, because not labouring means not eating. Not eating means not surviving. And survival in this era is not a guarantee. It's a goal, an aspiration, like sainthood, but with more blisters. And no matter how tired you are, no matter how hollow your limbs feel, or how blurry your vision gets from sheer exhaustion, you keep going. Because no one is coming to save you. There's no HR department, no lunch break, no end in sight. Just dirt, repetition, and the vague hope that maybe tonight, sleep will show mercy. It won't. You're outside now, working, which in this case means hauling, lifting, scraping, chopping, bending, pulling, and praying your spine doesn't give out before the rooster does. The job depends on the season and your social rank. But here's a secret. No one's job is easy. Even the noble's son has to pretend to read something or look serious at a ledger while the rest of the village fights with mud and firewood. You, however, don't have the luxury of pretending. You're in the fields. Your tools are simple. A wooden hoe, a rusted sickle, a cart with a wheel that shrieks like it's being exercised. There's no tractor, no ergonomic anything. It's all muscle, friction, and dirt. So much dirt. On your hands, in your mouth, under your nails since last August. The work starts before you're ready and ends after you've stopped caring. You stoop to pull weeds from the ground. They fight back. Everything in this century does. Plants, weather, the occasional squirrel with boundary issues. The sun climbs, slowly, like it's mocking your pace. You feel the burn on your neck, even through your coarse wool tunic, which is doing nothing except absorbing your sweat and converting it into chafing. Your hands blister, then callous, then crack open again. It's a cycle, not of growth, but of slow bodily decay. Your fingers are stained with earth, your joints are stiff, and you've forgotten what it feels like to move without groaning like a haunted door hinge. The worst part? You're not alone. Other villagers are out here too. All of them just as tired, just as sunburned, just as sore. Everyone moves at the same trudging, haunted pace. No one makes eye contact. If you lock eyes, someone might start confessing, or crying, or both. You shift a sack of barley on your back. It's heavier than it should be. Or maybe you're just weaker than you were yesterday. Either way, your spine protests with every step. You think about dropping it for just a moment, resting, maybe sitting. But someone would see, and someone would talk. And then you'd have to answer to your father, your priest, or the neighbour who thinks standing up straight is a sin against God's intended curvature. You glance at the others. A child is gathering sticks with trembling hands. He's maybe 6, maybe 5. It's hard to tell with the layers of grime and the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's already seen 2 plagues and an unfortunate pig fire. He yawns, wobbles, and keeps going, because that's the rule. You keep going. Inside your skull, your brain is sloshing around like half-cooked porridge. Thoughts come slowly, they form, then fizzle, then vanish. You try to remember if you slept last night. You think you did, but it felt like being knocked unconscious in slow motion. There's no such thing as sleep debt here, only sleep bankruptcy. You've been overdrawn for years. You swap your hoe for a bucket, fetch water from a stream, and nearly fall in. Not because you slipped, because your knees forgot how to exist. You catch yourself, barely. Someone laughs. Not cruelly, just knowingly. Everyone's fallen into the stream at some point. It's practically a rite of passage. By mid-morning, your arms are shaking, your back is numb, your thoughts are static. But there's still more to do. You haven't even mucked the animal pens yet. You haven't helped patch the thatch on old Firth's roof. And you still owe your cousin an afternoon helping him move a cart of cabbages from here to a place with slightly less mud. None of these tasks come with instructions, or rewards, or end dates. You don't finish work. You just move on to the next part of it. The break is when the sun goes down, or your body does, whichever collapses first. And the worst part, there's a good day. No rain, no illness, no toothache, just pure unrelenting exhaustion stacked on top of bad posture, blistered hands, and the vague hope that maybe, just maybe, you'll collapse tonight hard enough to call it rest. Spoiler, you won't. By midday, your body feels like a collapsing barn. Everything is slightly tilted. Something creaks every time you move. You're just not sure if it's your spine, your joints, or the wooden pail you've been dragging around like a defeated ambition. There is no lunch break. There is lunch, theoretically. But the idea of a break is fantasy. You eat standing up, kneeling in dirt, or walking. If there's something in your hand, even better. The closest thing to sitting is crouching by the fire and not passing out. Someone passes you a hunk of bread. It's dense, grey, and harder than your worldview. You gnaw on it like an animal with poor dental insurance. It tastes like damp history. You swallow quickly before your brain has time to form opinions. You don't talk much. Not because there's nothing to say, but because your energy is reserved for survival, lifting, grinding, walking, not screaming. Language becomes optional. Grunts, nods. The occasional muttered curse when your foot finds rock pretending to be part of the road. The women are working too. Not that they get recognition for it. They're hauling, stirring, scrubbing, fetching, raising children, and being blamed for everything from crop failure to coughs. Their work doesn't pause. It multiplies. Someone's wife is baking flatbread on a slate near the fire. It smells almost comforting until you realise she's using smoke to chase the flies off her baby's face. Multitasking, medieval edition. You offer to help, not out of gallantry, but because your arms have stopped responding to traditional commands. She hands you a pot. You stir. It's hot, sticky, and smells like onions, wood ash, and ambition boiled down to paste. You stir anyway. Inside the house, someone else is spinning wool. Her hands never stop. Her eyes don't blink. She rocks gently with the rhythm of the wheel, like a person who's given up on everything except the thread. Meanwhile, the children are collecting firewood. And not sticks for a marshmallow roast kind of firewood. Full branches, logs, the kind that weigh more than they do. One of them drags a branch through the mud, face pinched, lips chapped, eyes already carrying the look of someone preparing to live exactly the same day for the next 40 years. There are no naps, no second winds, just wind. And it cuts through your clothing like disappointment. You're not sure what time it is. No one is. The sun is halfway across the sky, which means there's still too much day left. Too many tasks. Too few spoons. You bend down to lift another bucket, and your vision narrows. Not quite blacking out, just dimming. Your body's way of saying, that's enough. And the world's way of replying, too bad. You straighten slowly. Head spinning. Knees threatening revolution. But you keep going, because stopping means explaining yourself. And explanations cost energy you no longer possess. There's a brief pause as someone yells about a missing sheep. Everyone turns. You hope the sheep got away. You hope it started a new life somewhere better. You picture it sipping clean water, napping in the shade, forgetting your name. You envy it deeply. Then someone finds the sheep. Everyone sighs. You return to work. The fantasy dies. Afternoon drags like a broken wagon. You churn butter. Your arms shake. You grind flour. Your shoulders scream. You dig up weeds. Your spine crunches like old parchment. None of this leads anywhere. You won't finish today's list. You won't finish tomorrow's either. Because the list doesn't end. And neither does the fatigue. It's not a matter of being sleepy. Sleepiness is soft, gentle, a suggestion. This is different. This is exhaustion as a personality trait. You don't feel tired, you are tired. Down to your soul, down to your DNA. If someone drew your blood, it would come out yawning. And yet, you continue. Not because you're strong, but because stopping isn't an option. By the time the sun slouches toward the edge of the sky, you've forgotten what your hands are supposed to feel like. They just hurt. In the casual, all-over way that doesn't inspire drama. Just resignation. The pain isn't sharp. It's ambient, like smoke, like fog, like the soundtrack of existence. You're not walking anymore. You're dragging yourself from task to task, moving only because you started earlier and momentum hasn't let you stop yet. The fatigue is behind your eyes now, pounding, pressing, like a second skull made of sleep debt. Someone nearby drops a bundle of wood. They stand over it, breathing hard, not because it was heavy, though it was, but because they know it will have to be carried again. And again. And again. You don't carry things here. You escort them through life until they rot or break or become someone else's problem. Dinner is called, not with a bell, with a shout. Sharp, loud, and entirely joyless. The pot has been boiling all day, not because of a recipe, because that's how long it takes to make food out of scraps and spite. You sit near the hearth with the others. It's warmish. The fire glows dimly. It tries. You huddle close, half hoping it sets your sleeve on fire just so something different happens. The stew is ladled into wooden bowls. Everyone eats in silence, chewing the same way they work, methodically, without flair. It tastes like boiled roots and smoke. You find a pebble in yours. Or maybe it's a bean. Either way, it cracks against your tooth and reminds you you're still alive. Barely. Across from you, someone's already nodding off. Spoon halfway to their mouth, eyes sliding closed. No one wakes them. No one blames them. Everyone here knows what it feels like to be awake longer than your soul is willing to participate. The baby cries. Again. Always. A low rhythmic sound that settles into the bones of the hut. No one reacts. The sound is so constant, so ever-present, it might as well be structural. Like the roof or the damp. You finish your bowl. You scrape it clean with a chunk of bread that could double as a weapon. Someone jokes that it will break a tooth. Someone else says that's okay. Teeth only last until 30 anyway. You laugh. Kind of. The fire's dying down now. There's not enough fuel to keep it burning all night. You stack the embers. Spread the ashes. Tuck the pot closer to the heat, even though everyone knows the stew will be worse tomorrow. Then slowly, The room shifts. People begin to settle down. Blankets are shaken out. Not cleaned, just adjusted. Sleeping areas are reclaimed. Straw beds fluffed by tired fists. Floor spaces remarked by elbows and boots. The house transforms from a workspace to a sleeping den. Or tries to. There's no sense of peace. No feeling of arrival. You don't rest because you're finished. You rest because you can't move anymore. Your body folds itself into the same space it left 12 hours ago. The straw is colder now. The blanket is damper. The air is thicker, warmer, still reeking of turnip and feet and fire. Someone exhales. Someone else mutters a prayer. A third coughs, always with the coughing. You lie down, your arms ache, your legs throb. Your brain refuses to shut off, not from anxiety, but from confusion. It doesn't understand what time is anymore. It knows you worked. It knows you ate. But it doesn't know what happens now. It's too tired to dream, too wired to sleep. You stare into the dark, waiting for exhaustion to outweigh discomfort. Sometimes it takes minutes. Sometimes hours. Tonight, you hope for the former. The day is over. Your body has failed you. And still, you made it through. Barely. But there's no victory here. Only survival. And the quiet understanding that it will all happen again tomorrow. It's tempting to think that the rich had it better. And they did. If your definition of better includes slightly more distance from livestock, and slightly fewer relatives farting directly into your ear. But sleep, like everything in the medieval world, was filtered through the brutal lens of status. There was no such thing as equality in bedtime, where you slept, how you slept, what you slept on. It was all part of your social class, stamped into your body like a tax you couldn't escape. If you were poor, and most people were, you didn't have a bed. You had access to a bed-shaped idea. A pile of straw, a shared wool sack, a spot on the floor that didn't squeak too much when your knees touched it. You shared your sleep with your family, sometimes extended family, occasionally strangers, always bugs. Your blanket was communal. Your mattress was lumpy. Your night was fractured, interrupted, and drafty. You got used to it because you had no alternative. Complaining didn't fix the bed. It just made you look ungrateful. But what about the wealthy? The lords, the merchants, the clergy with the big rings and soft hands. They had real beds, with frames, wooden ones, carved and creaky. Beds that stood off the ground. Beds that said, "I don't sleep near chickens." They had feather mattresses, or what passed for them. More feathers than straw anyway. They had curtains, not for modesty, for heat. Thick woolen drapes that closed around the bed like a stage, trapping in every whisper of warmth and every scandalous snore. Some beds were so tall they required steps, literal steps. You'd climb into bed like ascending a pulpit, then pull the curtains shut behind you, and vanish into a cocoon of privilege. But even these luxuries had limits. For one, heat doesn't stay still. Stone walls don't insulate. In the winter, those grand chambers turned into refrigerated tombs. The tapestries helped, barely. You could light a fire, sure, but chimneys were still in their experimental phase. Half the smoke just lingered, floating up to blacken the rafters and your lungs. And then there were the servants. If you were a noble, you weren't sleeping alone. Someone was in the room with you, sometimes in the bed. A page, a maid, a favourite retainer. Someone was always nearby, not to protect you, to observe you, to serve you should you wake in the night, thirsty, shivering, or full of irrational guilt. Privacy didn't scale with wealth. It just got more decorative. Even kings shared their bedrooms, sometimes with courtiers, sometimes with dogs, often with political enemies who were being watched but allowed to sleep graciously at the king's feet. And if you were clergy, especially higher up, you had even stranger arrangements. Monks, for instance, didn't sleep long, or comfortably. They slept in stone cells with little padding and even less joy, because sleep was indulgent. And indulgence, in the eyes of God, was just sin in a nightshirt. Many monks would rise several times a night for prayer, matins, lauds, vigils. It wasn't just religious devotion, it was schedule-enforced insomnia. Imagine waking up at 2:30 a.m. every day to chant in Latin with a bunch of cold, barefoot men in a stone church lit by a single candle and the general smell of unprocessed dairy. Some monasteries banned soft bedding entirely. No pillows, no padding. Some even saw sleep as a temptation to be resisted. And if you fell asleep during prayers, shame and probably extra chores. But back to regular people. In villages, the line between sleep and survival blurred. Your position on the floor, literal and social, mattered. Younger children slept closest to the wall. Parents near the fire. Elders, if respected, got the dry spot. If not respected, they got the wet one. Disputes happened. Fights over blanket space. Arguments over who got to use the good straw. Whispers about lice transfers. Passive-aggressive poking. Every night, the same unspoken negotiation. How little can I move without losing heat, comfort, or dignity? The answer, not much. But the worst part wasn't the discomfort. It was the awareness. The quiet, gnawing knowledge that your sleep said everything about your place in the world. If you were at the edge of the bed, near the cold wall, far from the fire, you knew your rank. No one had to say it. You felt it, and you dreamt in it too, when you were lucky enough to dream at all. Among peasants, there's a phrase, "You sleep where you earn it." Sounds noble. It's not. It means the one who works hardest gets to curl closest to the fire, while the rest of you fold into corners like discarded laundry. Except you all work hard. Everyone's tired, but some are more deserving than others. The father, the eldest son, the guest who owns a mule. They get proximity to warmth. You're somewhere between the drafty edge and the part of the floor that squeaks when you breathe. There are no protests. No, that's my spot. Just resigned glances and subtle shifts. Social order, like the thatch roof, isn't pretty, but questioning it gets you wet. Sometimes you end up next to someone you don't know well. A cousin's friend. A widow passing through. A tradesman with too many opinions about turnip storage. You don't speak. You don't ask questions. You just accept their elbow in your back and hope they aren't contagious. And yes, sometimes that's literal. Bed sharing is normal. Entire families, multiple generations. You sleep side by side, not because you like each other, but because the alternative is freezing alone in a barn or worse, being seen as aloof. In medieval Europe, privacy is suspicious. Wanting space? What are you hiding? So you share? And in sharing, you submit. Because there's a hierarchy even in how you lie down. If you're a servant in a wealthy household, Your sleeping arrangement is a direct reflection of how valued you are. The headmaid might get a straw pallet in the hallway. The scullery boy sleeps under the stairs. The stable hand passes out with the horses and pretends it's by choice. If you're lucky, you sleep near the hearth in the main hall. If you're unlucky, it's the cellar. Which sounds safe until you remember it's also the pantry, the wine storage, the mildew capital of the county, and occasionally home to whatever the cat dragged in and then lost. And what if you're not a peasant? What if you're a merchant, part of the slowly growing middle class? Congratulations. You've earned a bed that doesn't actively hurt you. Maybe even a room with a door that closes from the inside. But don't get comfortable. You're still below the nobles, and they will remind you at feasts, in taxes, and yes, even in sleep. When staying at an inn, you'll be offered a space near the fire, not beside it. You'll sleep in the same room as strangers. Rows of men and women wrapped in their cloaks, boots still on, bags tucked beneath their heads like sad pillows. You won't sleep well, but you'll pay for the privilege. Inns are loud, smelly, overcrowded, a blend of horses, haggard travellers, questionable stews, and foot diseases. There's no turn-down service, no mattress pad, just a wooden frame with sagging ropes and a lumpy pad filled with hay, old hair, and probably a live beetle or two. Still, for the merchant, this is progress. You earned this bed, this half hour of sleep interrupted by someone snoring like they're practicing for death. You earned it by selling salted fish or wool cloaks or candles made from animal fat and spiritual compromise. And yet, no matter your rank, your wealth, or your chamber's location, someone is always watching. For nobles, it's the chamberlain, or the lady in waiting, or the page who sleeps curled like a cat near the door. For clergy, it's the prior, the brother on night rotation. The god they claim isn't petty, but definitely tracks how often you twitch during matins. Even in dreams, you're never unobserved. And if you talk in your sleep, better hope it wasn't scandalous, or blasphemous, or suggestive. In small towns, rumours start with twitchy dreams and end with trial by fire. You want to be unconscious, but not too unconscious, because rest is necessary. But vulnerability, that's a risk. If you're a woman in the Middle Ages, bedtime isn't a break. It's just the next shift. All day you've worked, spinning, cleaning, feeding, boiling things that probably shouldn't be boiled, and stopping children from inventing new forms of chaos. And when the sun finally sinks low and the house begins to settle into quiet, you don't rest. You prepare everyone else for sleep. You check the hearth, tuck in the embers, set out the bucket, fold the same blanket that smells like 3 generations of breath. Then you lie down last, closest to the cold, furthest from the fire. Even in the horizontal position, women stay on duty. Children sleep next to you, often on you, their little bodies twitching and leaking and asking things at all hours. Your husband, if present, snores through it all, oblivious to the small war being fought beside him between teething and night terrors. You can't get up without stepping over someone. You can't roll over without elbowing a cousin. You can't sigh too loudly, or someone will ask if you're unwell. And you are, but not in a way that can be fixed by herbs. And if you're unmarried, that's worse. Unmarried women are suspect by default. Why aren't you in someone's bed? Who are you to demand space, or peace, or a night without responsibility? If you sleep alone, people talk. If you sleep near men, people really talk. If you sleep with women, people talk louder, in Latin, and the priest starts visiting more often. Widows sleep lightly, out of habit, out of grief, out of fear. Alone in the corner, they are respected but expendable. She's been through enough, people whisper. What they mean is, she's not worth checking on unless the roof falls in or the bread mould becomes intelligent. Servant girls have no boundaries at all. They sleep when the household does, after the master eats, after the pots are scrubbed, after the dog is fed, and the master's boots are placed just so. They curl beside doors, under tables, near the kitchen, far from safety. And even noble women, those silk-draped icons of romantic fiction, don't have it easy. Their beds are high and their blankets thick, but their nights are political. They share their sheets with diplomacy. A husband who smells of horses and passive aggression, a lady-in-waiting who's also a spy, sometimes a child sent to observe propriety, sometimes a priest sent to prevent it. They wear linen nightgowns with embroidery they didn't ask for, and wake at dawn to pray for sons they haven't conceived yet. The chamber is draughty, the bed is lumpy, the pillow smells faintly of anxiety and boiled fabric. And if they toss or moan or mutter in the dark, a servant hears. A story begins. It always does. Even sleep in this world is scripted. Even your dreams are judged. You can't cry out in the night without someone writing it down. You can't whimper without someone assuming guilt. A moan is never just a moan. A scream is rarely explained. Silence is safer. Stillness is protection. Stillness means you survive the day without giving anyone something to whisper about over pottage. So women learn to sleep quietly, to fold themselves into corners, to dream in whispers, to rest like they're hiding. Because often they are. At the end of the day, the bed wasn't just where you laid your body, it was where your place in the world was reaffirmed. You didn't climb into bed, you descended into it, folded into the same rough pile of blankets and limbs and expectations as everyone else in your rank. Your posture changed, your voice dropped, your sense of self shrank to fit the space you'd been allowed. Because that's all sleep was here. Permission. Temporarily granted. Easily revoked. And you learned early on not to question it. Children figured it out fast. Who got tucked in first? Who got to curl beside the fire? Who was nudged toward the door with nothing but a sack of hay and a muttered prayer? You could tell which child was favoured not by what they wore, but where they slept. Every inch of bedding was a social cue. A cold corner meant you weren't important. A place near the hearth meant someone thought you might survive the winter. Even your angle mattered. Sleeping by someone's feet? You were the lowest. Tucked beside someone's back. Trusted. Curled toward the edge. Replaceable. And this wasn't just in homes. At inns, travellers were stacked like firewood in shared beds. Feet to head, stranger beside stranger, all of them pretending not to breathe too loudly. If you paid more, you got a spot in the middle. Less, and you were on the edge. Closest to the draught, furthest from warmth. Easiest to roll off in the night. Monasteries had their own rules. Sleeping schedules, positions, punishments. You weren't just lying down. You were offering your body to God, which meant lying flat, hands folded, facing east, no twitching. If you snored, someone might elbow you. If you mumbled, someone might report you. If you dreamed too vividly, well, you'd be fasting tomorrow. And in castles, the bed itself was a symbol. A 4-poster fortress. Carved, canopied, draped with fabric that cost more than most people earned in a year. But it wasn't just about comfort. It was about watching. The lord slept in public, almost performatively. Courtiers lingered. Guards stood nearby. Servants stayed within earshot. Sometimes they pretended to leave, but stayed behind the curtain, just in case. A noble never truly slept alone. Not because they feared assassins, though that was part of it, but because solitude was beneath them. To be unattended was peasant behaviour. Even unconscious, a noble must be seen. Your sleep could be used against you. If you moved too much, if you sweated, if you called out the wrong name. Servants remembered things, and sometimes they told. In every village, every manor, every room that pretended to be private, there was someone who would recall how you slept, how often, how loudly, how selfishly you clutched the blanket, and repeat it by the next market day. Because sleep wasn't a secret. It was a mirror, and not a flattering one. It showed who you were when you couldn't perform, when your guard was down, when the social mask slipped and you were just a body twitching under linen, hoping no one noticed how small you really were. Even if you didn't talk in your sleep, your position talked for you. It said everything. And if you had any dignity left when the night was over, you were lucky. Because in this world, sleep didn't restore you. It revealed you. If you thought the church didn't care about your sleep, think again. It cared. A lot. Not just when you slept, but how, why, and with whom. Sleep wasn't just a biological event. It was a moral event, or a theological moment. A battleground between your soul, your body, and whatever demons the priest insisted were lingering near your feet. Everything had a rule. Everything had a meaning. There was a right way to go to bed. Prayer first. Always. No matter how tired you were. You prayed. Sometimes aloud, sometimes silently, sometimes just mouthing the words while your knees cracked beneath you. And only then did you have permission to sleep. If you forgot, that was a sin. Not a deadly one, maybe, but enough to make you feel guilty the next morning. Enough to confess it later, just in case God was keeping a ledger, which he was. The priest said so, and the priest talked to God, unlike you. You also weren't supposed to sleep too much. That was sloth, one of the 7 deadly sins. Sleeping late? That was indulgent. Sleeping in? That was weak. The devil, according to several sermons you half remember, through the fog of malnutrition, whispered to you in your dreams and made you sleepy on purpose. So if you had trouble waking up, not your fault. Just Satan doing Satan things. And if you woke up in the middle of the night, as people often did, that was a gift. A sacred hour. A chance to pray, reflect, or stare at the ceiling and wonder if your dreams were secretly visions. This mid-sleep wakefulness wasn't seen as insomnia. It was God calling you. You didn't ignore it. You didn't roll over and groan. You lit a candle, if you could afford it. You got up. You knelt. You whispered words you didn't entirely understand in a language no one had spoken conversationally for 500 years. And then, sometimes, you went back to sleep. If you were allowed. The church, of course, had its own internal bedtime policies. Monasteries followed rigid schedules. Bells ringing before dawn, structured prayers breaking the night into liturgical fragments. Matins, lauds, vigils. Names that sounded peaceful until you realised they were just midnight alarms with Latin branding. Monks might rise 3 or 4 times a night, chant in the cold, then return to their thin straw mattresses and attempt to sleep again, only to repeat the cycle an hour later. It wasn't restful. That wasn't the point. It was discipline. Sleep was dangerous. It dulled the soul, made you lazy, made you dream. And dreaming, that was its own problem entirely. Because dreams weren't harmless in the 14th century. They weren't your brain doing maintenance. They weren't residue of the day. Dreams were messages. From God, or the devil, or the saints, or your dead aunt. Interpretations varied. Dream of falling? That could mean pride. A warning? A sign of your impending failure. Dream of flying? Possibly spiritual elevation. Or maybe just too much turnip soup. Dream of fire? Definitely hell. Don't ask questions. Start fasting. People kept dream journals, or recited their visions to village elders, hoping for clarity. There were whole texts devoted to dream interpretation, guides filled with symbolic keys and vaguely threatening advice. Dreams were read like scripture, and nightmares? They were taken seriously, especially if they repeated. If you screamed in your sleep, you were being attacked by demons, invisibly. This wasn't poetic. It was doctrine. You might be an otherwise good person, clean soul, loyal to your church, regular with your tithes, and still wake up with the feeling that something pressed down on your chest while you slept. A weight, a presence. You couldn't move. In modern times, we call it sleep paralysis. In medieval Europe, they called it a succubus, or a night demon, or a punishment from God for not confessing the time you stole your neighbour's onion 3 winters ago. There was a name for it too, in different languages, each one chilling, each one whispered with fear around smoky hearths and in stone chapels. If it happened more than once, you needed a priest, or a relic, or a rebaptism. Maybe all 3. And if none of it worked, if the sleep terrors continued, if you thrashed or spoke in tongues, or dreamt of flames every night, people started to talk. Not just about your dreams. About you. What had you done? Who had you angered? What was living inside you? Sleep was not private. Sleep was not safe. Sleep was part of your eternal record. Of course, not everyone turned to the church when sleep got strange. Some turned to other solutions. The older ones, the quieter ones. The ones no priest wanted to talk about, unless he was sharpening a torch and looking for a stake. Because not every problem could be solved with a prayer. Sometimes you needed protection. Charms, herbs, salts, symbols scratched into door frames, iron nails tucked under straw mattresses, shoes turned upside down and hidden under beds to confuse evil spirits, because apparently demons can't handle footwear geometry. People would hang sprigs of dried St. John's wort above the bed, not because it looked nice, but because it was said to drive away bad dreams and worse things. Sage, thyme, lavender, not for scent, but for safety. Garlic, not just for flavour. It went above the lintel, beneath the pillow, or around the baby's neck. Anything to keep something out. They didn't always know what, but they felt it. and feelings were more trustworthy than priests most days. If you lived near the forest, or even just close to someone who knew too much about roots, there were other tricks. A ribbon tied around your wrist, a circle of ash drawn on the floor, a row of beans left on the sill, because folklore said spirits had to count every single one before entering. And by the time they finished, the sun would rise and they'd have to go back to wherever spirits spent the daylight hours. Probably your attic. There were stories, whispered, never written down, about people who woke up wrong. Eyes wide, voices different, skin cold. They claimed to be fine, they were not. These were people who'd been visited in the night, touched by something, or swapped entirely. Because yes, there were changelings too, mostly children, sometimes adults. One day, someone would fall asleep as themselves and wake up as something else, quieter, hungrier, wrong. You didn't say that out loud, of course. You just watched, waited, slept with a knife under your pillow and a bowl of milk on the threshold. And if things got worse, you went to the cunning woman. Every village had one. Old, vague, unsettling. She always had dirt under her nails and knew when people were about to die. You didn't like her. You didn't trust her. But when your baby wouldn't stop screaming at the moon, or your husband started dreaming in languages no one knew, you went anyway. She'd give you something to burn, or bury, or boil. She'd tell you to move your bed. She'd tell you to stop saying your name aloud at night. And you would listen. Because the alternative was being alone with what you feared. At night, fear had power. Even more than the Lord's Prayer. Even more than the priest with his wine and warnings. So people covered mirrors. They stopped whistling after dark. They kept a candle lit longer than they could afford to. Because somewhere, deep down, they believed in things. Unnamed, ancient things. That didn't like being looked at. And the moment you closed your eyes, that's when they came. So you didn't always want to sleep. You didn't always trust it. You fell asleep because your body collapsed. Not because it was safe. Not because the demons had gone. Just because your body lost the argument. Again, dreams weren't just a private matter. Not here. Not now. They were public property. Especially if they got interesting. Or inconvenient. Say you dreamt of flying over the village. The next morning you casually mention it to your neighbour while washing linen in the stream. He tells his wife. She tells her sister. Her sister tells the priest. And now you're being watched, because flying sounds too much like sorcery. And no one dreams of flying unless the devil's been whispering in their ear. Soon the priest visits. He doesn't accuse, not yet, just asks questions. About your diet, your prayers, your friends, your dreams. He looks at your hands a little too long, asks if you've been speaking with any women who own black cats or know what yeast is. The implication is clear. Dream the wrong thing, and it becomes a confession. Especially if you're a woman. Because women's dreams weren't interpreted the same way. If a man dreamt of war, it meant bravery. If a woman dreamt of war, it meant trouble. If a man dreamt of a saint, he was chosen. If a woman dreamt of a saint, she was hysterical. If she dreamt of anything strange, snakes, storms, symbols, someone would ask whether she was bleeding. And then they'd ask whether she might be lying. Eventually, she might stop talking about her dreams altogether. Or worse, start believing them. Some did. Some people built entire belief systems from what came to them in sleep. Visions, warnings, angels, end times. A peasant in a smoky room sees a burning tree in her dreams, and suddenly she believes she's been chosen by God to lead a movement. A boy dreams of the Virgin Mary weeping into a bucket and starts reciting prophecy. And if enough people listen, that's a problem. The church didn't like unsanctioned dreams. Dreams were allowed, but only in the right hands. Saints, clerics, holy men with proper robes and Latin vocabulary. If you had a dream, it meant your soul was exposed, vulnerable, possibly infected. You needed guidance, supervision, penance, unless you were useful. Every now and then, someone's dream would be convenient. A nobleman dreams of hellfire. The priest says it means he should donate land. A merchant dreams of famine. The church says it's a sign to tithe more, before the crops fail. A child dreams of a burning ladder stretching to heaven, and suddenly there's a new shrine in town and a brisk market for candles. It all depended on context. Dreams were power, but only if they served someone else. Otherwise, they were dangerous, and if you didn't dream at all, that was strange too. The church called sleep a small death, a reminder of the final one. So if you pass through a night without vision, without whisper, without message, what did that mean? Had God gone silent? Were you being punished? Or worse, ignored? Some began to crave the dreams, chase them, stay up at night asking for them, chanting, whispering, sleeping in a certain direction, eating herbs they'd been told might open the door. Others feared dreams altogether, trained themselves not to remember. They'd sleep curled tight, hands folded, lips sealed, hoping to pass through the night like a ghost through a locked door, unnoticed, because a quiet night meant safety, and anything else could mean exposure. There's a point where the rituals blur together, the prayers, the charms, the muttered protections and last-minute apologies to saints you don't fully trust. You begin to wonder, not aloud, but quietly, inside the thinnest corner of your thoughts, if sleep was ever meant to be restful at all, or if it was just another way to measure obedience. The church said sleep was sacred, but sacred things aren't always safe. They told you to rise early, pray often, cleanse your dreams, keep your body still and your mind sharp, to fight temptation, even in your unconsciousness, which is like being asked to wrestle while underwater, blindfolded, and then judged on your form. It wears on you. And no one calls it what it is: exhaustion, spiritual, physical, total. You don't rest, you perform. Sleep becomes a ritual of compliance. You follow the rules because not following them means questions. And questions mean attention. And attention means shame. You start to choreograph your own collapse. Lying down exactly right, facing the holy direction, reciting the lines that buy you just enough peace to drift off without guilt. And when the dreams come, you don't explore them, you edit them. You wake in the morning and strip out anything too vivid, too odd, too memorable. You keep the dreams bland and quiet, so bland you can repeat them if asked. Just a white-robed figure, just a peaceful meadow, just a distant bell. Anything stranger would require explanation, and you're too tired for that. The people around you start doing the same. No one says so, but you know. They stop mentioning the dark figures in the corner. They stop describing the man with the glowing eyes who whispered their real name. They stop admitting they woke up screaming, because to scream in the night is to suggest weakness, or possession, or worse, doubt. You can't doubt the system. You can't say, maybe dreams are just dreams, because everything has meaning. You say that enough times, and eventually, you believe it. You start to see your own sleep as a test, not of health, of faith. Are you sleeping too much? Too little? Are you waking at the proper intervals? Are you dreaming the approved content? Are you sleeping the way God intended? What is the way God intended? No one says. You just guess. Every night you guess. And you hope it's good enough. You go to bed with guilt folded under your blanket, next to the lice, beneath the sound of someone muttering in Latin in their sleep. And in the final quiet of the room, when the fire's down to a breath, and even the chickens have stopped shifting. That's when you finally feel it. You're not alone. Not in the comforting way, but in the watched way. The air is thick. The silence is sharp. There's nothing in the room technically, but there's something just outside the edge of knowing. Something old. Something judgmental. Something that remembers what you dreamt 2 nights ago, and how you smiled. And so, before sleep takes you, again, unwillingly, you whisper a few more words, just in case. A protection, a confession, a bribe. Because sleep is not rest. It's negotiation. And you never quite know who's listening. There is nothing normal about medieval sleep. It is horror disguised as routine. It is absurdity accepted as ritual. You don't just lie down and drift off. You collapse like a marionette whose strings were frayed by wind and guilt. Your mattress is hay, full of bugs, occasionally damp, occasionally whispering. Your blanket is shared. Your pillow is theoretical. Your roommate is snoring, farting, possibly dying. You can't tell anymore. This is sleep? Not really. This is shut down. And once you're down, the night begins. Not the kind of night where you dream peacefully of trees or old lovers or metaphorical birds. No. This is the kind of night where your own brain tries to kill you with images. Because the dreams, they are bad, the product of mouldy rye, constant stress, seasonal despair, and an ambient awareness that you will never, ever be clean again. You dream of drowning in milk. You dream of teeth falling from the sky. You dream of your own mother turning into a cow and whispering Bible verses backward while your cousin tries to marry a chicken. You wake in a sweat, gasping, confused, only to realise someone else in the room is already screaming, and no one's doing anything about it, because this happens all the time. Somebody always screams in the night. A child, an elder, a guy who ate too much onion and tried to sleep with his feet pointed toward the door. You don't ask questions. You don't even flinch anymore. You just sigh and roll over into the wet side of the straw and hope it wasn't an omen. It probably was. The night is full of weird, half-accepted horrors. Rodents scurry across your legs like they're late for a meeting. Insects crawl into ears and set up tiny orchestras. A neighbour's cow moos at 2:47 a.m. like it knows something about your future it's not legally allowed to say. Someone burps, loud and deep, from the other side of the room. A burp that sounds like it came from another plane of existence. You assume possession. You go back to sleep. And when the dog starts growling at the empty corner, you ignore it. Because looking would make it real. Meanwhile, the wind outside howls like it just got fired by God. The thatch roof creaks like it's about to quit. The moon casts a light so pale and weirdly personal that you start to feel like it's watching you. It probably is. Your body, for its part, doesn't know what to do anymore. You toss. You turn. You shift so much the fleas leave out of respect. Your back is cramping. Your feet are frozen. You can't get warm. You can't get still. So you whisper a charm. Or a prayer. Or the lyrics to that one drinking song about turnips and regret. You try to sleep. You really do. But then someone gets up. Always. Every night. Someone, barefoot, hunched, mumbling, rises in the dark and starts wandering. You open your eyes. You don't move. You just watch. It might be your brother, or your neighbour's apprentice, or someone who doesn't live in your house but is definitely here now. They walk from one side of the room to the other. Pause. Turn. Mutter something about a horse. Sit down in the corner. Stand up again. Lay face down in the fireplace ashes like that's normal. No one stops them. Because this is just what happens. You live in a world where sleepwalking is not a medical condition. It's another Tuesday. People wake up outside, naked, in trees, in graves. Yes, that actually happened. There are stories, old, real stories, of villagers waking up inside tombs, having apparently climbed into open graves during the night and just curled up. Why? Because sleep made no sense. Your body was exhausted. Your brain was chaotic. Your soul was constantly under review. The result? An 8-hour horror film produced entirely by your own genetics and the communal air quality. And yet, this wasn't seen as strange. It was normal. This was just sleep. You closed your eyes and hoped to survive it. Eventually, you stop expecting sleep to be restful. You start treating it like a trial. Something you endure, like fasting, lice, or conversation with your in-laws. The sounds never stop. There's always someone snoring. But not gently. Not the kind of gentle, human snore that says peace. No, this is a weaponized snore. A medieval nasal sawmill powered by bad posture and inherited sinus trauma. There's always someone whimpering in their sleep, dreaming of taxes, or wolves, or accidentally marrying someone from the wrong hamlets, and always someone talking, not full sentences, just muttered fragments, warnings, numbers, ominous lists of birds. Someone once said the name Agnes 47 times in a row. No one knew an Agnes. The house was cold for a week afterward. And yet, in all this chaos, no one ever wakes up and says, that was strange. Because it wasn't. It was expected. Your house creaks. Your walls moan. A rat drags something unidentifiable across the floor. And you just think, well, at least it's not in the bed. There are medical absurdities too. Sleep wasn't just uncomfortable. It was actively dangerous. Let's talk about sleeping posture. Not in a modern, ergonomic sense. In the medieval world, you slept sitting up if you were important. Lying flat was a position for corpses. So nobles, monks, and the wealthy would prop themselves up with pillows, boards, or awkwardly placed furniture to maintain a holy posture, even while unconscious. This led to incredible neck pain, and a lot of people waking up unable to move their arms. But better to wake up sore than damned, right? There were entire debates, actual theological arguments, about whether dreaming of sin was the same as committing sin. Some priests said yes. Others said not unless you enjoyed it. A few said only if you remembered it. which led to the practice of confessing your dreams out loud to another human being. Imagine dragging yourself into church after 3 hours of rat-disturbed half-sleep to mumble, "I dreamt I kissed a goat, but it might have been symbolic," while a priest writes it down in Latin and nods like this is very spiritually helpful. And if you happen to laugh in your sleep, that was dangerous, because laughter was linked to pride, and pride was the root of heresy. And heresy meant you were one bad joke away from being set on fire in public. Sleep became a psychological minefield, but worse than theology was the medicine, because medieval sleep problems had medieval solutions. Couldn't fall asleep? You'd be prescribed a mixture of boiled lettuce, vinegar, and poppy juice. Still awake? Time for leeches. Yes, actual leeches. They believed your sleeplessness came from an imbalance in your humours, and draining blood would realign your soul. Still not working? Maybe your organs are wandering. That's right. Some doctors believed your liver could move around in your body during the night and cause nightmares. This was treated with firm massage and mild panic. If you slept too much? Well, then you were clearly lazy, melancholy, or under the influence of Satan. Recommended treatments included cold water baths, loud bells, and shouting encouraging Bible verses directly into your face. And if none of it helped, well, maybe you just weren't meant to sleep. Some people weren't. That was a real belief, that certain souls were cursed to remain restless until they repented properly, tithed harder, or went on pilgrimage barefoot in January. If you confessed everything, fasted for 7 days, wore a wool shirt soaked in vinegar, and still couldn't sleep, then maybe you were already halfway to the other side. But don't worry. Someone would still expect you to wake up at dawn and muck the pigs. Because nothing, not demons, not plagues, not insomnia caused by 14th century mattress materials, excused you from chores. At some point, you stop being sure where sleep ends and waking begins. You lie down exhausted, you close your eyes, but what happens next doesn't feel like rest. It feels like leaving your body, your house, your sanity. The dreams don't just haunt you, they follow you back into the real world. You wake up sweating, heart pounding, convinced something touched you. Not emotionally, physically. You check for bruises, you check for claw marks. You find none. And yet, the feeling lingers. So you sit up in the dark, shivering, and listen to the wind, to the breathing of the others, to the roof cracking like old bones. Then you hear it, scratching. Something small, something alive, maybe a rat, maybe not. You don't move, because if it's just a rat, that's fine. But if it's not, you don't want to know. You don't want to see the night hag, the spirit thief, the nameless grey-faced child that legend says visits once every few months, to press its hands over your mouth and whisper things in a language your soul isn't allowed to forget. No one talks about it, but everyone knows. They call it different names. They describe it vaguely. They pretend they don't believe. But they still light a candle, still whisper a charm, still sleep facing the wall, because the wall doesn't watch. This is normal now. Sleep isn't a health practice. It's a gamble. And the stakes are getting higher. Because now, people have started dying in their sleep. Not gently. Not of age or plague or anything you can point to and say, well, that was expected. These are the sudden ones. The ones who gasp, claw at their chests, eyes wide with terror. and then nothing. Gone. The healer blames the air. The priest blames the devil. The neighbour says it's the owl that landed on their roof 3 nights ago. Everyone starts listening more closely to the sounds of the night. Every squeak is a warning. Every cough is a curse. Every bad dream is a prophecy waiting to happen. The town begins to drift toward Death Watch culture. You start staying awake to watch your loved ones sleep. Not because it's sweet, but because you don't trust the night not to take them. People sleep in shifts. People keep water at the bedside, salt, knives, mirrors covered, doors barred. Cats allowed to walk freely, because cats can see the things you can't. And when a child wakes screaming, you don't say, "It's just a dream." You ask questions. What did you see? What did it say? Was it looking for someone? And everyone gets quiet. Because it might come back. And because no one wants to admit how much they believe in this. But they do. They always have. Because somewhere deep in the walls of medieval Europe, beneath the prayers, behind the rules, under the scratchy wool of theology, there's something else. A feeling. A knowing. That the dark isn't empty. That the night isn't safe. And that when you fall asleep, you aren't resting. You're stepping into something's territory. And sometimes you don't come back. Eventually, you stop asking what's real. You stop separating sleep from wake, dreams from prophecy, fear from faith. Because the night doesn't care what you believe. It only cares that you listen. And you do. Everyone does. Sleep becomes a communal hallucination. No one talks about it that way, of course. But it's clear. People mutter things when they wake up. Things that match someone else's dream. A woman says she saw her grandfather walking through the field at midnight. He's been dead for 6 years. A boy wakes up and describes a fire that hasn't happened yet. A monk draws a spiral he saw in a vision. The village elder recognises it immediately. He doesn't say why. People don't dream the same. But they dream in parallel. Images repeat. Symbols echo. The veil between bodies and minds thins, and sleep becomes a kind of shared fever. Everyone's tired, and not just physically. They're tired of pretending this is normal. They're tired of acting like snoring isn't sometimes voices. They're tired of explaining why the straw feels wet, even when it's dry. So they stop, they surrender. Not in some dramatic, candle-snuffing way. Just slowly, quietly. They start to accept the night for what it is. A space without rules. And the absurdity only grows. You wake to find your shoes filled with herbs you didn't put there. You go to sleep with 2 people in the bed and wake with 4. Someone begins singing in Latin at 3 a.m. and no one knows who it is. Only that it stops the moment someone lights a candle. The cat refuses to sleep indoors now. The baby laughs at corners. The door unbolts itself. You've had nights where you don't remember sleeping at all, and others where you're sure you slept for days. But the sun says it's only been hours. There's a story that goes around. No one knows who started it. A man who dreamed he was awake and woke to find he'd never slept again. Another about a woman who never spoke, until one night she began reciting every dream anyone else in the village had ever had. She burned up from the inside, but only after she laughed, hard. The priest said it was blasphemy. The healer said it was prophecy. The local drunk said it sounded like his mother-in-law. Everyone laughed, then stopped. Because the truth is, none of this is funny, but it is ridiculous. Utterly, completely. A world where you have to negotiate with the dark every night, where a sneeze at 2 a.m. means an omen, where your mattress is alive, where your own dreams might betray you. A world where a yawn is political, where snoring is a sin, where sleep is not rest, but survival theatre. And yet, somehow, you go back to bed. Because what else is there? You lie back down. You close your eyes. You breathe through your mouth, because your nose is full of hay and someone's boot. And you hope that tonight, you just sleep. Not dream. Not scream. Not walk into the woods wearing nothing but shame and socks. Just sleep. For a few hours. In the only place you've ever known. A bed full of noise. A room full of watchers. A night full of rules. And the strange, quiet hope that nothing answers back. There's a kind of fatigue that doesn't go away. Not with sleep. Not with prayer. Not with another round of lavender boiled in wine and whispered over by your aunt's herbalist cousin. It sits behind your ribs like a second heart. It beats slower, heavier, quietly. That's what medieval people lived with. This wasn't exhaustion from one bad night. This was inheritance, passed down like bad knees or a crooked roofline. Your parents were tired. Their parents were tired. Everyone you knew was always one yawn away from collapse. And it made you wonder, even as a child, was this normal? And the answer was always yes. Because how would you know any different? From the moment you were born, sleep was never about recovery. It was a pause, a brief interval between pain and labour, between hunger and guilt, between frostbite and fever dreams. It never fixed anything. No one ever said, that nap cured me. Instead they said things like, I dreamt of my own funeral again, or I woke up colder than I was before I slept, or worst of all, I didn't dream at all. Because in this world, silence could be just as terrifying as noise. Stillness could be just as dangerous as chaos. And sleep, real, deep, honest sleep, felt like a myth whispered by someone with too much imagination and not enough exposure to reality. You were always aware of your body, always conscious of your discomfort. You didn't drift, you waited for morning, waited for noise, waited for the familiar sound of someone else groaning, so you knew you hadn't slipped away entirely. And over time, the fear faded. Not because it got better, but because it got boring. The first time something knocked on your door at 3 a.m. and no one was outside, you were afraid. The 50th time, you were annoyed. You stopped worrying about demons and started worrying about whether the chimney would collapse in the night and crush your aunt. Because some things were more real than devils, like roofs, like rodents, like the slow, irreversible ache in your bones that made you think you might be older than you were told. You stopped trying to protect yourself from spirits and started trying to protect the last dry blanket from the cousin you kicked in his sleep. You stopped dreaming of peace, started dreaming of less noise, less breathing, less waiting. Sleep became a corridor you had to pass through. Every night, again and again. Nothing new waited at the end. Just the same wall, the same floor, the same faces. But you still went. Because if you didn't, the day was worse. There comes a night. It doesn't matter which one. when you realise you don't remember the last time you woke up rested. Not refreshed, not energetic, just not hurting. And that's when it clicks. This isn't temporary. This is your baseline. This is what life feels like. You've grown used to it. The cold that settles behind your knees, the tightness in your neck from sleeping at the wrong angle on the world's least interested pile of hay. The dull ache in your stomach that's not quite hunger, but not hunger either. The dream residue that makes you feel like you've been chased all night by regret. It's all normal now. No one talks about feeling good. That isn't expected. That isn't relevant. The goal isn't joy, it's continuation. You sleep not to restore, but to reset. Not because it helps, but because you'll die faster without it. And no one wants to die in their sleep. Not here. Because people remember that. They talk about it for months. They turn it into a lesson. She died in the night, someone will say, like it's a moral failure. He was found cold by the fire, they'll whisper, like it was avoidable, like he should have just been stronger, smarter, warmer. So you try to stay just uncomfortable enough to wake up again. You learn the art of controlled discomfort, a strategic misery. You never get too warm, because then your body relaxes and you stop noticing danger. You never fall too deep, because that's when the nightmares find you. You hover in the half sleep, float in the fog between the rooster and the rats, and when the sun rises, or when someone tells you it has, because windows are a luxury, you get up, you move. You begin the next cycle of ache and apology. And even though it's hell, you're proud. Because you made it. Another night. Another silent survival. No screams. No fever. No accusations. Just you, awake, again. And somehow that's enough. But only barely. The hard part isn't the exhaustion. It's the normalisation. The way you start to believe this is how it's always been, how it has to be, how your children will do the same, and their children after them, because that's just how things work. You stop imagining comfort, not because it's painful, but because it's irrelevant. Comfort is a story for someone else, a noble, a priest, a merchant with 2 sheep, and a mattress stuffed with goose feathers. You hear about those things, but you don't resent them. You just file them away as impossible. Like flying. Like a dinner without crumbs. Like a night where no one coughs themselves awake. You get used to grief. You get used to discomfort. You get used to the absurdity of fatigue as identity. Because who are you without your tiredness? What would you say if someone asked, "Hello, I'm exhausted in 4 different directions. Hi, I haven't had uninterrupted sleep since the last comet." You don't even joke like that anymore. Jokes require energy. You just nod. You smile. You pretend your joints don't creak when you move. Because even if everything hurts, the show must go on. You must wake. You must haul. You must churn. You must pretend that sleep helped, even when you know it didn't. Because the only thing worse than pretending is admitting the truth. That you are not well, that no one is. And that sleep, blessed, brutal sleep, is no longer a haven, but a burden you carry into the night. Like a second body made of fog and cold air and things you no longer dare to feel. Some nights you almost cry. Not because of pain, not because of fear, but because you remember, just for a second, what it felt like to believe sleep was supposed to heal you. You don't believe that anymore. You don't even remember where the idea came from. A story maybe. A hymn. Something someone said before they got too old to keep saying things. But every now and then the memory sneaks in. And it breaks you a little. You lie in bed, surrounded by bodies, by breath, by the soft rustle of someone scratching themselves in the dark. And you feel something inside you flicker. Not grief, not even sadness. Just absence. The absence of peace. The absence of softness. The absence of a night where you weren't waiting for something to go wrong. And when you feel that flicker, you shut it down fast. You tuck it under the blanket with the other feelings you're not allowed to name. Because you can't afford that kind of thinking. You can't afford softness. That's how people break. You've seen it. People who wanted more, comfort, kindness, stillness, they usually didn't last long. Not because the world killed them necessarily, but because wanting something that doesn't exist is poison. So you want less. You ask for less. You shrink your hope until it fits inside a night where no one dies. That's the most you dare to wish for. A quiet night. No fevers. No visitations. No screams. Just you and the floor and the walls that don't fall, and the fire that doesn't go out. And in the morning, if you're lucky, someone brings you water, or bread, or even just a nod. That slow, knowing, half smile that says, I didn't sleep either. That's the closest thing to intimacy you get now. Shared exhaustion. Shared hallucinations. Shared defeat. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it's even beautiful. Two people peeling potatoes side by side, not speaking, just blinking against the sunlight like it's a betrayal. A child curling into your side, not because they need comfort, but because they're too tired to cry. A neighbour covering someone else's feet with a ragged cloth, without being asked, without being seen. These moments don't erase the pain, but they hold it, for just long enough. And maybe that's what sleep is now. Not escape, not renewal. Just a place to put your pain for a few hours. A shallow grave for the part of yourself that can't survive the day. Eventually, even grief becomes a rhythm. You stop reacting, you start responding. A cough in the night doesn't startle you. It's catalogued. A groan isn't concern. It's familiar. Someone gasps in their sleep, and you don't sit up anymore. Not because you're callous, but because you've learned what can be saved and what cannot. And you lie still. Not because you're calm, but because stillness is all you have left. It's not discipline. It's not strength. It's just what happens when you've run out of ways to fight the dark. You surrender quietly, as everyone does. But what's strange and hard to admit is that you're not entirely alone in that surrender. The person beside you, even if they snore, even if they mutter nonsense about geese or penance or saint something or other, they're still there. Their presence is proof. Proof that someone else is also pretending this is fine. That someone else is also trying to sleep through the sound of the roof cracking and the air coughing up frost and the dream of their sister's funeral again. And that makes it bearable. Not better. Never better. But bearable. Somewhere behind your closed eyes, you remember the shape of laughter. You can't feel it, but it's there, like an old bruise, like a prayer you don't say out loud anymore. You dream, briefly, barely, of warmth, not of fire, not the sun, just the warmth of being next to someone else, who is also tired, also trying, also failing in the same direction. It's not hope. You wouldn't call it that. It's not healing. No one here believes in that anymore. It's just the closest thing to comfort anyone has now. A shared ache. A collective collapse. A world where the only way to survive the night is to fall into it together. And in that last moment, just before your body wins, just before sleep finally drags you under, you think maybe this is enough. Not joy, not clarity, not peace, just the absence of aloneness. A bed that doesn't creak too much. A blanket that almost covers your feet. A night that hasn't killed anyone yet. And the distant sound of someone breathing who isn't you. It's not what you wanted, but it's what you have, and you let it take you. And now the house is still. The fire's gone out. The last cough has faded into the walls. You're here, somewhere between sleep and something else. Not quite dreaming. Not quite gone. Just floating in the dark. Like a thought no one had the courage to finish. Let the night do what it wants. It always does. There's nothing left to fear, not because it's safe, but because fear takes too much energy. So close your eyes. Let the candle go out and rest. Not because it will help, but because it's your turn.